Recording right now. Lucy, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. I'm so excited to talk with you all today.
Yeah, it was very cool because a couple years ago you were on my podcast and you were introduced to me through another former guest on my other podcast, and you have a pretty outstanding story for whether you're 20 like you are, or whether you're 50 or whatever age, because it's pretty incredible what you've done thus far in your young life. And so I'm excited to share that story and then get into some of the lessons you learned. I was going to say as a kid, but you're still kind of a kid. Sorry, you're 20, you're not a kid.
Feels
uh,
like it. I feel like a kid still. It's a
but I,
compliment.
yeah, I want to get the real life lessons that you've learned and how those lessons can help, a middle and high school kid through the challenges that they're going through.
Mhm.
So I guess start out, maybe 2 minutes or less, kind of start out telling us your background, where you grew up, where you live now, and then we'll get into the pretty awesome stuff that you've done.
Yeah, my childhood has been a whirlwind for sure. A lot of people say like, man, it seems like you've like lived a life of like you're 50 years old just because I feel like I've done a lot in my time here, which has been amazing. I was born in Michigan, but I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky in my childhood years. I was homeschooled a bit, which is interesting, but that allowed me and my family to travel around the US and start climbing mountains. So that was just a really amazing time in life. And then I transitioned back into the public school in seventh grade and went to high school actually in the Chicago area. So I was in a Chicago suburb for all throughout my high school. And then just last year, I went to college and now I'm at the University of Southern California in LA. And just throughout that time, I've been climbing mountains. That's kind of my, I guess, claim to fame is mountaineering. I've been doing it since I was 7 years old. So it's something that's just part of my life now. And also running competitively all throughout middle school, high school, and now in college as well.
Very cool. And I want to kind of back up a little bit. You said you were homeschooled, and a lot of students that I speak to mostly public schools, some specific groups within public schools, but a lot of the students that I talk to have a feeling of being left out, have a feeling of being left behind or not fitting in. When you were homeschooled, and then when you moved to a new school, public school in seventh grade, talk about some of the feelings, emotions, or realities of being homeschooled. Even just,
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years ago, probably when that was. Homeschooling has come a long way since that time. So just talk a little bit about the feelings of fitting in or not fitting in, and then moving on to a public school in seventh grade.
Mhm. Yeah, homeschooling, there were so many like pros and cons. One of the pros is that I got really close with my family. My mom and dad gave me a great education. They are like they're doctors and everything, so they really were focused always on education. So that was amazing. But then you do kind of lack that social aspect that being in public school gets you. I was always on a running team, so I always and I had like close kind of childhood friends. But I remember I homeschooled from second to sixth grade, and I remember like looking out my window, like watching kids walk home from school and being like, I'm so jealous. Like I want friends like that. I want to, like go to school. So then I was really excited in seventh grade to start public school. But it was so difficult for me because I had never been in like the public school atmosphere at all. So I didn't even know how to use a computer. I remember that was like the biggest struggle for me in school was trying to like learn how to actually use the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And then just being that like rigid schedule of like bell to bell, going to different classes, changing mindsets. And then also just like socially, it was just a completely new world. Like I didn't know where to sit at lunch when I went in. I didn't know even like what a cafeteria was like. I had never done all of that.
So
So it was difficult for
let me
sure.
let me interject real quick because that's one of the biggest examples I use for students when I talk about not understanding what other kids are going through, and then also extending acts of kindness. If you see someone sitting alone, ask them to sit at your table. Like, actually take us into that. You walked into a cafeteria seventh grade. You don't know anyone. Where did you sit? what did that look like?
Yeah. Luckily for me, there was this one girl who I had my locker below hers. We were like locker mates, and she invited me to sit at their lunch table with them. And it was so I was so happy because that was something that I was most nervous about, because it is scary. Everyone's together. It's not like the classroom where, you're assigned a seat or it's like you just sit wherever's available. It's like the cafe, it's everyone together, and it's exposing, and I think we find that a lot in different areas of life, like throughout your life as an adult, as a teen, and especially like in as like a middle school, high school student. It's the cafeteria is like the essence of that. So I was lucky enough to be brought into that group, and eventually, honestly, like they weren't really the right group for me. They were all like dancers, and I just didn't really relate to them. So eventually I did like actually change to a different friend group, which I kind of felt bad about because I was like, these are the people who brought me in, and really like was there when I needed them. But then, when you're in middle school, I was in middle school, people are changing and just trying to figure out who they are. So luckily, like they gave me a lot of grace with like, this isn't the right friend group for me. And I think everyone at that age, that's something that's a big lesson that a lot of kids need to learn is having that grace to be like, okay, everyone's just trying to figure themselves out
No.
here. It's not no one needs to be judged, not or like take everything personally. Sometimes people just aren't the right fit for you.
Yeah, talk about all the time how some of my friends in middle school are my best friends now. Some I haven't talked to for 25 years. It just there's an ebb and flow to life. So you mentioned that you're in Southern at USC right now. USC, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you're running. And then you mentioned this thing, mountaineering, since 7 years old. And that's kind of your thing, right? That I think that's an understatement that's kind of your thing. But talk about you're a very humble person, but I'm going to ask you to humbly brag a little bit. Record some of your stats in terms of climbing accomplishments.
Definitely. So my first kind of like record I broke was the youngest woman to summit all the lower 48 high points. So that's climbing to the top at the top of every state. So the tallest mountain in every state. So I did that when I was 12 years old. And then I became the youngest woman to summit all 50 state high points when I was 17 years old. And then I became the youngest American woman to summit Mount Everest when I was 18 years old.
It's crazy because that is a life. That is a life packed in not even just 20 years, because a lot of that you got accomplished in 12 years and then 18 years or 17 years. So it's a tremendous feat. And mountaineering is not like wrestling, right? I wrestled and I fought, and all I need is a pair of wrestling shoes and maybe a headgear, and that's it, right? Mountaineering
Yeah.
is not just equipment, but travel, logistics, safety, GPS, like uh, flights, hotels, all of it.
Mhm.
It seems so overwhelming, and a lot of students are overwhelmed with just regular life. They're overwhelmed with life that is not summiting all high points in the 50 states and summiting Mount Everest. So how do you chunk down such big goals like that, and or how do you fit it all into your schedule?
Mm. It's definitely been very difficult for sure. I feel like I am never like having downtime just because, I'm always either at school, and then as soon as school gets out, it was like, okay, let's go to another mountain because it's all that travel and logistics, you can't really do it during the school year. You can't fit it in a weekend trip. It was always like, okay, winter break comes, we're gonna go do this mountain. But at the same time, that's what I loved. Like mountaineering it was an escape for me. It still is an escape for me. Just from like the regular everyday life, because like life gets heavy. You get stuck in wherever you are, whether it's in school or at home. You just need a break sometimes. You need that place to escape. And I think everyone finds that in a different spot. And you know, escaping can be healthy or unhealthy depending on like what your method of escape is. But for me, I always found such peace, and that I could be exactly who I was in the mountains. Like there was no one around like judging me or just like kind of influencing who I was. It was just me and in nature and having just an adventure. And that's exactly what I needed in those breaks from school. So it was it definitely difficult, but something that I needed and I loved, I still love and need in my everyday life.
I'm going to ask you a question that's probably going to be a difficult question. I get asked it a lot, so it's a little bit less difficult only because I've been asked it a lot, right? So if a student is listening and they're thinking, that's so awesome, but I don't have that thing. Like,
Mhm.
what is that thing? I don't have that thing. I wish I did. What advice would you give them? And I don't know if you've been asked that before. I don't know if you thought about it. There's not a right or wrong, but I'm a student and I just said to you, I love that. I think it's awesome. I don't have a thing like that. What do you recommend?
I'd say for people like that don't really know what it is yet, I'd say start with something in nature. Because I feel like in our regular lives, like in this kind of era, it's all kind of focused around being comfortable and being just like easily accessible and uncontrollable. And when you get out in nature, it's just the complete opposite of that. It's uncontrollable, it's wild. And I think that the human spirit really needs that to be healthy. You know, I think that's something that I know I need, and I've seen it in my friends and my family that people just seem happier and healthier when they have that in their lives. And I think nature is the easiest way to find that. And just for me, it's been the best way. And you know, there's a lot of different things you can do in nature too. Like you could go on a hike. You know, you could go camping. You could go mountain biking or surfing or running. I love like I'm a big runner, so like trail running is something that I find a lot of peace in. It doesn't have to be like this big mountaineering expedition, and it can be like I mean it's amazing to do that, but just starting kind of small, like going out and like drawing in nature, painting. It could be anything, but just really incorporating that kind of like nature in there, I think would be a great place to start.
Perfect. It's a great answer. Two more kind of questions. So success. Okay. You got to the top of the high points in the 50 states. You got to the top of Mount Everest, which is like I'm laughing because I read books about people who do that, and it sounds so crazy, right? And you're a 20-year-old regular girl that I'm talking to, and you did it, so it's just crazy to compute that, right? Um, what if you didn't get to the tops? What if you didn't get to the top of Mount Everest? Does that mean you're a failure? Does that mean that everything was pointless? Because a lot of kids think you study and you fail the test, or you try out and you get cut. I'm a loser. This is terrible.
Mhm. Yeah.
What is success to you?
That's always a difficult place to be in. And there's been mountains where I haven't gotten to the top. Actually, the last mountain I attempted was the second tallest mountain in the world, K2, which is said to be one of the hardest mountains in the world to climb, harder than Mount Everest. And I didn't get to the top. And I think a lot of kind of society likes to say that's a failure and like put these really rigid definitions on what failure is. But from luckily from my mountaineering from other failures that I've had or like failures, I've really found that it doesn't like looking back, it doesn't really matter if I make it to the top or not, in that I will grow and learn and become a better mountaineer from the times I fail way more than the times I succeed. And it's that I define as success now. I feel like it's just you have to define success for yourself, you know? And it's difficult, like, because there is a lot, you know, there is a lot tied to, you know, success in school or success in athletics, things like that. But at the end of the day, like when I look back on my middle school and high school, like I can't remember what place I got in the state race. Like I can't remember those things, but I remember all the work every single day I put in and how that's made me such more of a better person today if, by doing those things. And it's something that yeah, it's a difficult mindset to have, but once you like make that switch and really can define it for yourself, like I did all I can, I worked my butt off. That's going to be enough for me, no matter what the results are. It's very freeing. It really is. And that's when you can really I think, fall in love with something, for real. Like that's how I fell in love with mountaineering, is by redefining that failure.
That's awesome. And the word freeing is a great word. And I talk about that a lot from fighting. And when you face your fears like that, how freeing it is, because you realize like, whoa, nothing can stop me. You know, it is a very, very freeing feeling. And then the last question I have for you, I get asked this a lot, and I'm curious because it's so hard to give a clear answer, but what drives you, right? You said you started mountaineering when you were 7. I think you climbed the 48 when you were 12. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then 17 or 18. And then like, what drives you? Where's it come from?
Mm. I think from a very young age, I was always very like a very competitive child. I always wanted to just see how far I could go. Like mentally, physically, in school, like I was almost like an addictive personality type of thing. Like when I was into something, like I would give it my all, and other things I would like neglect, like other things just to like be all into this. So when I like discovered mountaineering, I was like, I want to be the first to do this. I want to be the youngest. I want to be the best at the sport. And that was my driver for a long time. But then when I did kind of like fail, I failed in my goal to become the youngest woman to summit all 50 state high points at the age of 13. And I went back at the age of 17 and did it. But at 13, that was a big like shake for me. I was like, well, maybe I'm not the best, maybe I don't want to do this. And
Mhm.
that's when I really like discovered, I stepped away from mountaineering, and then I just realized like I missed it so much, not like for the fame or for like I don't know, the success and things like that, or like the record breaking. I just missed it because I love to do it just with all of my heart. I loved it. It was my escape. It was that freedom I needed from everyday life, that adventure I needed in my life. And that's really what drives me now, is just my pure love for it. And I think that has allowed me to be happy even when I don't make it to the top. That's allowed me to feel a lot more free doing what I love. So yeah, I'd say that at first it was definitely like competition success, and then now it's just kind of love for what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I would add to that kind of my question earlier, what if a kid doesn't have that? I would add to that, go back to what you said about trying something, and you suggest starting in nature, that if a kid is like, yeah, but there's nothing I love so much that I don't want to win in anything. I don't have anything to work towards. Start trying stuff, go out for stuff,
Mhm.
read stuff, watch stuff, do stuff. It takes work. I mean,
Yeah.
firsthand, it takes work to climb a mountain. And Lucy, how do you climb a mountain? Do you know this? How many steps at a time? One step at a time.
I get it. Yes.
Yeah, it's like, there's a saying like, how do you climb Mount Everest? One step at a time. It's real. It's actually that way, slowly and steadily, and that's also a great approach to life as well. So we'll wrap it up here, but I would like you to put out, I guess, any if a student would like to follow you or connect to you, are you active on social media? And if so, which ones are you active on?
Yeah, the main social media that I use is Instagram. I'm very active on that one. So my Instagram is What's Next Lucy, and then that links directly to my Facebook. So if you're a Facebook person, it's just Lucy Westlake. And then I also have a TikTok. I'm not super active, but occasionally I post on it, and that's also What's Next Lucy.
It sounds very much like me in terms of social media. I'm relieved to hear Instagram, because I'm like, yes, that's an easy follow. I don't have TikTok, I don't have
Yeah,
Snapchat, et cetera, et cetera. So, but
yeah, it's hard to do more than one. It's
it is
just
very
I
hard,
love to do one.
especially when you're climbing mountains, right?
True.
Well, it was really cool having you here. This is the first interview that I put on Spaniard School, and it's a special one. And I really appreciate your time, Lucy.
Of course, I'm so glad that I got to talk with you today. Appreciate it too.
Thank you.